But the problem is nobody believes me. That's the ridiculousness of what goes on Twitter all day. Is it all finished? Is the banana zone finished? Is it all over? So the fabled altcoin season, everyone's like, it's never going to happen again.
All that matters is adoption. So here's the adoption of ICP.
Always like to talk about Bitcoin to gold, and
Citibank, Switzerland's SDX, joined forces to tokenize $75 billion. Welcome back. The whole purpose of this channel is to make life-changing returns by being an early-stage investor. It's one of the most efficient ways of reaching financial freedom is just to make the right investment bets. You don't have to start a whole company. You don't have to work 25 years at a law firm trying to become the partner of a law firm. You can just do what other early-stage investors before you have done, buy very early-stage assets very inexpensively that are revolutionary, change the world, and provide life-changing returns. That's the whole mission of this channel. So today, we're going to go through updates from the head of macro research at Fidelity. Raoul Pal gave a macro update, and even Cathie Wood, who a lot of people make fun of, but the truth is her strategies haven't worked for the last 3.5 years for the issues we've been talking about. So she dives into the macro a little bit, provides some charts that are very exciting for some early stage investors. Let's see what these three people have to say. First up, Yuri and Timur at Fidelity.
We had a retail bubble in '68 when all the space stocks and all the electronic stocks, kind of went to feverish highs. Think of it as like the meme frenzy back then. Back then, any company with the word tronics in it was trading at a 50 multiple, even if they had nothing to do with electronics. Then we had kind of that retail wipeout, 69.70. That was a recession. Market fell like 37% or something like that. Then it recovered, and we made a new high in January '73. But by then, the market was really in the hands of institutional investors because the retail was wiped out. And those institutions only wanted to buy the IBMs and the Xerox and the Colgates, the blue chips, and we call them the Nifty 50 stocks. And those ended up trading at nosebleed valuations. They were trading at 2 times the PE of the rest of the market, of the bottom 450. And then inflation killed valuations across the board, which is what inflation does. It destroys valuation for anything. And then we had another Nifty 50 boom, of course, during the dot-com era in the late 90s. Those stocks ended up trading at a 2x multiple. So these were like the Ciscos and the Dells and things like that. That became a valuation bubble that imploded just on its own weight, under its own weight. So that was not an inflation episode, but just a valuation bubble, pure and simple. And so now we have the third Nifty 50 or Nifty 7. You start talking about Bitcoin. Bitcoin, of course, is trying to be like gold, or exponential gold as I call it, but it's also like the NASDAQ at certain points, right? So I liken Bitcoin as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde because you never quite know which Bitcoin is going to show up to the party. Like you always know which gold is going to show up because there's only one gold. But in the last few months, of course, we've had gold, soar to new highs while Bitcoin was in a correction because it was being the NASDAQ instead of being gold at that point. And now I think maybe a baton pass will happen.
So there he's talking about how markets work. You have big frenzied bubbles. Everything pumps. Everything with Tronics in it pumped at one point. Everything with .com in it at one point pumped. Everything with blockchain in it at one point pumped. Everything with AI in it at one point pumped. What happens is there's a massive bubble. All the garbage assets get flushed out, trend to zero, and the highest quality assets on the planet skyrocket and provide life-changing returns. That's why we stay on top of the highest quality assets on the planet. We're going to talk about some of those later in this video. He's also bullish Bitcoin, which, as we all know, leads altcoins. So now moving into altcoins specifically, what did Raoul Pal just drop? What does he say is coming next?
What they're doing is creating narratives for today to explain liquidity conditions from 3 months ago. That's the ridiculousness of what goes on Twitter all day. It is the lack of understanding of what actually drives these markets. What are the dominant factors? The dominant factor is financial conditions, which lead liquidity, which lead markets.
So to look at the price chart of Chainlink or ICP or Tau and to say they're not doing anything without understanding why misses the whole picture, right? Price charts are noise because they're lagging indicators. What matters is forward indicators. What's coming next? So again, let's dive into what he's saying about what comes next.
The last time this happened, the Trump cycle, Well, that was the initial correction that we got. We had this whole period of correction, much like we've had now. It stopped in about March. Well, we got to about April. And then we did this. And from that correction low, it did a 23x. Now, I don't expect Bitcoin to do a 23x because this was much earlier in its adoption curve, but some of the others will, something close to it. We've got a perfect setup, one of the best setups I've ever seen, because we know the debt has to be rolled. We know the forward-looking liquidity is coming, and we know how assets react to it.
So he's saying we've seen these conditions before. They've been super negative, and then they resolve positive. Part of that has to do with the fact that the U.S. government has to refinance trillions of dollars of debt. Look at the amount of government debt the U.S. government has to refinance this year. Trillions of dollars, something like $7 trillion. They need rates to come down. They need liquidity to come in to give them the ability to refinance that debt at lower interest rates. So we've seen this play out before. He's saying Bitcoin did a 23x last time. He's saying it's not going to happen again because it's later stage. But he is saying early stage altcoins will. The highest quality altcoins on the planet will do something like a 23x. Again, that's why it's so important to find quality.
So this was the 16-17 cycle. This is the equivalent one I think now. Breakout, retest, explodes higher, does this whole liquidity tightening. That's the bear market. That's when the economy slows down. That's when rates go up. Does the same thing. COVID gave it a false, a double shot. It did it again. We're doing exactly the same thing. It's almost a complete repeat of the 2017. What we've also got here is Global M2 against Bitcoin. So it's the same chart, but now we can see what happens to Bitcoin every time this happens. It breaks out, retest, and then Bitcoin starts hitting the next leg of the banana zone. Usually you start the banana zone a bit earlier with the breakout, you have the correction, and then it goes. And then we get the banana zone part 2, which is usually alt season.
So what this chart is saying is that global M2 is going up. Whenever this black line skyrockets, we see Bitcoin absolutely skyrocket. So are some of the highest quality, most revolutionary altcoins on the planet responding? Well, here's the price of ICP in the last week. It's gone from, in the last few days, it's gone from $4.50 to $5.40. It's like a 25% move, right? That's how powerful this macro stuff is. When they start printing money like crazy, we see assets skyrocket. Again, it's all correlated. It's like you don't have to worry if the price came down. That's in the past. What matters is what's coming next. Here's the chart of Chainlink in the same period. From $13 to $16, another massive move. So what comes next?
This is the global M2 chart versus Bitcoin with a 12-week lead, and it works. What it tells us is the back end of this year is basically a one-way street with a few corrections. The corrections will be normal. You will be questioning me saying, is it all finished? Is the banana zone finished? Is it all over? Do I need to get out now? And generally speaking, just follow the money. It really is that simple.
So this chart shows where we are currently and where we're headed. Black line move up. That is supposed to be extremely bullish for these assets.
So at this point is when Bitcoin super accelerates, and that point lies ahead. We're about to see that point now. It also is what drives altcoin season. So the fabled altcoin season, everyone's like, it's never going to happen again. It's just a function of the business cycle. The moment the business cycle picks up, everyone has spare cash. Cash gets recycled into assets. People move further out the risk curve. So altcoins are exactly the same as credit spreads, small caps, emerging markets, junk bonds, all of this. They're all exactly the same thing. It's also the same with fine wines. It's also the same with Rolex watches, all driven by the same thing.
So altcoins are correlated with everything. So you can bet on Bitcoin, you can bet on the S&P 500, you can bet on real estate, you can bet on some boring asset, or you can bet on altcoins. And altcoins outperform everything, and it's all correlated to the exact same thing. So we know why they've fallen. We've seen ugly charts like this, which is the business cycle down, and we know why they will rise when this chart moves back up. It really doesn't get bigger than that.
But the problem is nobody believes me. Everyone's like, no, but the markets and Trump and tariffs and geopolitics and China and then Russia and it's all the... And what you've all done is price in maximum fear. People are crazy with fear. Finally, the fabled banana zone chart is not to do with the halving cycle, nothing to do with any of that. It's all driven by liquidity cycle and funding of debts. Each phase, we get phase 1 of the banana zone, the corrective zone, banana number 2 comes, another correction, banana number 3. So this is the banana zone. So that's what happened in 2020, 2021. Off we go. That was the last one. Here we are now. Can't be clearer to me. The forward-looking liquidity suggests that, again, probabilistically speaking, without any guarantees, this whole thing goes into Q1, maybe Q2 of 2026, which would align with Trump's trying to win the midterms as well.
So what he's saying is alt season is essentially here. In previous videos, we pointed to the end of April as kind of being the end of the bottoming zone. And it does seem like that happened, which would be so massive, because what that means is potentially life-changing returns in the next few months. The only wrinkle is interest rates are still sticky high, right? I showed you this chart showing how much government debt needs to be refinanced this year. How is the government going to refinance $7 trillion worth of debt when interest rates keep going up in the face of what they want to do, right? This is the 10-year bond yield, sticky high. If they refinance that debt at these rates, their interest expenses are going to go up by tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars a year. The U.S. government can't afford that. So this time's a little different. But again, the Fed can also buy bonds and play games on its balance sheet and print money and stifle interest rates below where they naturally belong. So it's all manipulated. That's why I don't try to time the market. I try to buy the highest quality assets on the planet. And Raoul Pal is saying we're just getting started with a massive bull run banana zone. The head of macro research at Fidelity is bullish Bitcoin. You cannot be bullish Bitcoin and expect life-changing returns without getting a massive pump in altcoins. Again, I showed you the chart of ICP. I showed you the chart of Chainlink, both skyrocketing. Now let's quickly look at an update from Cathie Wood, because I know a lot of people disagree with her, and that's totally fine, but she shared some interesting charts with point to what's going on with these altcoins.
What did that very sharp 22-fold increase in interest rates do? It shut down home sales. You can see, and the actual number, peak to trough, existing home sales dropped 39%. And they really haven't recovered. So housing has been in a recession. Auto sales.
So housing has been in a recession. This chart looks exactly like the chart that Raoul Pal showed of the ISM, the economy, right? They've all been down and cratered for 3 years. It also looks exactly like the chart of altcoins, down and cratered for 3 years. When betting on the turnaround that Raoul Pal is predicting, you can bet on housing, you can bet on the S&P 500, you can bet on stocks, or you can bet on altcoins. We all know altcoins will outperform everything. So it seems like the reasonable bet.
Always like to talk about Bitcoin to gold. And again, gold going parabolic did take this ratio down. But you'll notice that it did not break the uptrend that is in place and that we think will remain in place. Bitcoin did act more as a risk-on asset in the market's recent correction. It behaved like the NASDAQ, unlike gold. But we believe that it was just correcting to this trend line because the Bitcoin price went up so much more than the gold price last year. So we think that this trend line will continue to move up. If we're right, that we're moving back into a risk-on environment.
So she's bullish Bitcoin. Raoul Pal is extremely bullish Bitcoin. And the head of macro research at Fidelity, Yuri and Timur, they're all bullish Bitcoin. And we know based on what Raoul Pal said, it's most likely not going to 23x. What will 23x? The highest quality altcoins on the planet. So let's dive into what's going on with some of these high quality altcoins. First up, Chainlink. So Space and Time, the SXT token, just launched today. Space and Time mainnet went live along with community claims of SXT. As part of this, we're recognizing Chainlink ecosystem participants. Chainlink has been a key partner since day one, and their ecosystem has played a major role as core members of our community, helping Space and Time grow into what it is today. What is Space and Time? Well, this comes from Microsoft.com. Space and Time helps customers decode blockchain data with Microsoft Azure OpenAI, Microsoft-backed verifiable data warehouse that provides customers with easy access to data from the blockchain. FTI Technology, a global consulting firm and Microsoft partner that provides digital insights and risk management solutions, is evaluating how Space and Time's AI models through Microsoft Azure OpenAI can support its expert-led services for blockchain data. Right? So it's a asset backed by Microsoft also backed by Chainlink and using Chainlink's technology. If you own Chainlink and stake it, you would have gotten airdropped these rewards, right? That speaks to how closely Chainlink is working with the biggest players on the planet, including Microsoft. Citibank, Switzerland's SDX, joined forces to tokenize $75 billion of pre-IPO shares market, right? So we've talked about how quadrillions of dollars worth of value, hundreds of trillions of dollars worth of value are moving on chain. The assets that capture that secure that value are going to make a massive amount of revenue. And we've talked previously about why Amazon skyrocketed and gave life-changing returns. It's because they generated exponential revenue, similar to Amazon, right? Revolutionary technology. So we know Citibank's working with SDX. What is SDX? Well, SWIFT, the international bank messaging standard for 11,500 plus banks, is working with Chainlink to enable financial institutions to connect to any existing public-private chain using Chainlink and their existing SWIFT infrastructure and messaging standards. Chainlink CCIP was used to enable the cross-chain settlement of tokenized assets across public and private blockchains. The successful collaboration featured 12 plus world-leading financial institutions, including Euroclear, Clearstream, ANZ, Citi, right? We just talked about Citi, BNY Mellon, BNP Paribas, Lloyds Banking Group, and SDX. Of course, Chainlink is involved behind the scenes with the tokenization of $75 billion of assets. When Urian Timmer talks about the highest quality assets emerging and the rest kind of trending down and how the institutions are only interested in buying the highest quality assets, he's talking about Chainlink. He doesn't realize it because he hasn't done the deep dive into Chainlink, but that's what he's talking about. What about ICP? Well, this is from Coindesk.com. Mass adoption of Web3 through self-writing internet. A new blockchain revolution is imminent thanks to advancing AI and vibe coding technology, such as Dominic Williams, founder and chief scientist at Dfinity. So if you're not familiar with ICP, it's a globally distributed supercomputer that can operate free of big tech and is all attached to a decentralized blockchain governed by ICP token holders. That's all well and good. Lots of crypto projects promise great technology. All that matters is adoption. Because if you can back up those claims, right, self-writing AI software and a world computer that doesn't need big tech, and you're being adopted, that's the sweet spot for life-changing returns. All that matters is adoption. So here's the adoption of ICP. Look at the transaction growth. Skyrocketing on ICP very recently. This is April 13, 2025. We're at a 3,400 number. Look at where we are in May 8, 2025 at a 12,000 number. Exponential growth, exponential adoption. There are 39 SNS DAOs, different crypto projects on ICP. Look at the amount of capital that is flowing into these projects. It's like a venture capital incubator. Open chat, $5 million. Total raise, $79 million of capital flowing into ICP projects. Then you have 350 plus ecosystem projects building on ICP, and we're seeing exponential growth across the board. And I've already pointed out in previous videos how ICP is the 6th highest revenue generating layer 1 blockchain on the planet. Extremely high quality. So these are two of the highest quality altcoins on the planet based on their exponential adoption, which are primed to take advantage of whatever Raoul Pal is predicting is on its way for a banana zone.